Wow, wow, wow. It's me, it's Rob Ryan. I am back with another incredible conversation. Entrepreneurial Thinkers. Man, I am just sometimes so grateful and so blessed for the fact that I get to put on a headset and a microphone and have conversations with the entrepreneurial thinkers around the world that I get to talk to. And today's conversation with Jessica Bedoya, the founding managing partner of LARA Fund, which is a unique, new, innovative private equity fund that is focused on Latin America, was wow, mind blowing. You know me, as she would describe us, as Latin Americanists. You know me to be one of those. She is one. And today we dive deep into why Latin America in 2025 is the region in the world to invest in and to help develop economics. If you are an entrepreneur, an operator, an executive, or a government official in the region, or you are an entrepreneur, an operating executive, investor, or government official outside the region who's trying to find places where you can deploy your capital and have an impact on the developing world, this is it. Latin America is primed in this moment to kind of combine itself again and reattach itself to the Americas in the broadest sense. It is a unique moment in history that sometimes only presents itself when the rest of history is very uncertain and tenuous. And that's exactly what's going on right now. So Jessica just wows me with her perspective, her sensitivity. She is a proud Latina, and that gives her a leg up in understanding the cultures and the personalities involved. But she is bringing every bit of her vast government experience, her high level exposure and relationship network to bear on the building of her fund, LARA Fund. And this is a story you're not going to want to miss. So we hope you enjoy it as much as we did making it.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. This is the show where I get to have weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry, as we come together with hopes to try and have our conversations leave this world a little bit better than we found it. I'm super excited today to have a returning guest, Jessica Bedoya, who's the founding and managing partner of the LARA Fund. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we get a chance to meet her, and then we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about all things private capital, equity investment opportunities in Latin America and why that matters. Jessica is not only a returning guest, alumni, as we like to call it, of our show, but she's been busily building a bridge between global capital and Latin America. And in fact, in my humble opinion, she is the bridge, as we were just discussing off air before we jumped on here. The LARA Fund is a private equity firm that's reshaping how investment flows into high growth markets in Latin America and the Caribbean. From briefing presidents in the White House Situation Room to structuring billion-dollar deals that blend sovereign debt and private equity, Jessica's career is literally like a masterclass in strategy, diplomacy, impact, and relationships. She's part visionary, part operator, and now 100% trailblazer. Her career has spanned both high impact and highly influential leadership roles across government and the private sector, such as being an adjunct professor at USC, a chief strategy officer and chief of staff at the Inter-American Development Bank, or to now formerly managing director at the US IDFC, and Deputy Senior Director of Western Hemisphere Affairs to the National Security Council. She's a proud Latina, hardworking and loving mom, and true believer in the entrepreneurial potential of the Latin American region. And today, she's with us, ready to talk risk, reinvention, and why betting on Latin America's growing economies is smarter than ever. So it's really nice to say, welcome back to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, Jess. It's great to see you.
And it's amazing and an honor to be back and to be invited back. It's so nice to see you too, Rob.
Things are well. You're coming to us. Just give people some geographic context. You are constantly on the move.
I am.
You LinkedIn the other day. You were foreshadowing that you're packing already for a trip that's coming up. But you're coming to us today from South Florida, and you kind of split your time in the U.S. between South Florida and D.C.
That is correct. I'm sort of a hybrid beast right now as I'm in the midst of fundraising and deal sourcing. I'm between Washington, D.C. and South Florida. This is my brief rest stop, literally and figuratively, between trips. I was just in Mexico City and I'm headed down to Medellin and to Bogota on Sunday.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm living my old life through you now, which is better because you're younger and probably in better shape than I am. So I'm
Well, then
happy to.
let's talk in 5 years and maybe we can
Right,
have a
exactly.
reunion show and we
There's a
can both
reason
look at
why.
the next
Yes,
generation.
it's all the gray in the beard and the lack of hair up
Yeah,
here. It was those 9 years running around nomading in Latin America. But
exactly.
let's dive right into it. There's so much
Sure.
that I want to tap into your wisdom and
Yes,
frankly
of
just your
course.
on the ground experiences because I think what I believe is that very few people, even active investors, either whether they be venture capitalists in kind of the startup side of the world or more mature private equity growth capital that's coming in looking for larger scale projects, bigger companies, bigger.
Yeah.
I feel that even the smartest and most informed of them lack a real timely awareness of what it means to do business in or invest in Latin America. So I want us today, we've got lots of going on, international trade issues, relationship
Yeah.
issues, all kinds of politics. That's always true. It's just a little louder right now than
Yeah.
usual. But we can't control that, right? But what we can
No.
control is the relationships we build. And so I would love for you to kick us off by talking to us about today, 2025, all things considered, like why do you see there's so much opportunity in Latin America's entrepreneurial economies?
Because today Latin America is actually at a really interesting crossroads. And I keep telling people this in the private and public sectors over and over again since January. I think what we're seeing right now in the world is that there's an active effort to decouple from China. There are wars in Europe and in the Middle East. And here lives Latin America in its southern hemisphere, you know, location, proximity to the United States, generally overshadowed by headlines recently since January, for good and for bad, and in a generally good space of conflict free status, of sitting on an abundance of human capital, an abundance of natural resources, a real yearning for private capital. Post COVID, recovery has been slow and slower than expected. And governments right now are at an interesting crossroads where they have to really make choices, really stark choices of admitting to the fact that the governments can't be funding everything everywhere all at once. Private sectors there are trying to figure out how to get into US markets and how to tap into foreign capital. They don't really know how. And all they get is a lot of resistance and they get a lot of frustration out of that.
Mm.
So 2025 for Latin America is a real big opportunity to finally break through the frustration, to get rid of the barriers to entry for foreign investors, and to really open the doors to smart, what I keep saying is smart and strategic investors that have the right image and vision for the region.
That's
The
awesome.
region doesn't want exploitative investors. The region doesn't want to be taken for a ride. The region wants partners that it can trust, that it can grow with. And ultimately, and we'll get to this later, as an investor, they want to be able to have first dibs and first rights on any assets that foreign investors are investing in because they
Sure.
want to keep capital in their markets. And you know what? That's what they should want. They should
Well,
want capital to stay in their
there's
markets.
there's so many good reasons, right? Um, I, you said something that even as much as I think about it, which is maybe just a shade less than you think about it on a regular basis nowadays.
Yeah.
You said something that even caught me by surprise in a really thoughtful way. Is we kind of juxtapose for all the historic instability of the region, right? For a
Yep.
bunch of geopolitical risk, cultural change, all those things,
Sure.
comparatively to, as you said, in the other regions presently, right now, like war is not a thing that pops up on South American,
No.
Latin American radar. Like
No.
aside from like 1970s internal Civil War type strife, like warring neighbors and literal breakout of actual war isn't one of the
No.
geopolitical risks of Latin America historically.
No. And I think that's what as a Latin Americanist, if I deign to call
Yes,
myself that,
I love that.
I think that's what's most offensive to me about the perception of risk in the region, right? You're talking to me about, raised eyebrows, like, wow, really? You're really singularly focused on Latin America? Yes, I am. Why? Because the headlines don't scare me. Political uncertainty, electoral uncertainty, that happens
Well,
here. That
yeah.
happens in our own country.
Now we can say that, right?
Right? Like we have political uncertainty, we have electoral uncertainty. That's part of democracy.
Right.
And if we're telling ourselves in our desks behind our Bloomberg terminals in New York or wherever we're living and working well, there's a lot of turmoil in Ecuador. Let's hold.
Right.
Guess what? That doesn't bear trust. That doesn't bring to bear the fruits of smart and strategic investment. The signal it sends is, okay, countries are going to try to hurry up to try to put lipstick on a pig so that you can hurry up and bring your capital, and nothing's going to be done right. The transaction isn't going to be structured correctly. There's a rush to deploy capital. The countries are trying to prove to you that you're wrong, and you're just trying to take action and move money because you owe a return to your investor at the end of the day. And that
Yeah.
whole ecosystem and approach to Latin America doesn't work. And Latin America electoral uncertainty to me is what they say in Spanish, pan de cada día. It's an everyday issue.
Right.
It's something that the citizens live with every day. It's something that I, as an investor, live with every day. And it just requires a little more diligence, a little more rigorous rigorous thinking in terms of how you're looking at the markets, and a lot more honest broker conversations.
Yeah, I mean, boy, to your point, I mean, you nailed it, right? The Bloomberg profile, like that person sitting on the East Coast somewhere behind their Bloomberg terminal, rendering all these opinions about the regions of the world, would say that about your metaphorical example of Ecuador. But at the same token, prior to say 2021, at the same token, would have been investing in oil projects in Russia, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Would have been
All
investing
over all over
or
Russia,
Southeast Asia, or like all these
or
much
Turkey,
more,
or all over Turkey as an
right,
emerging economy, and look
right,
at
much
Turkey
more
blowing up.
tenuous, much more risky, literal like war risk.
Correct.
But would
Correct.
dismiss this because Argentina's like churned presidents for the last 50 years, and they have like that as you say, it's just kind of baked in. I love that. 170 or 780, almost 800 million people in the region,
Yep.
right? A
Correct.
huge portion of that population is younger people, right? Highly
Correct.
educated, like a huge network of universities and secondary college secondary educational opportunities. Sitting on, in most of the countries, if not all of them, sitting on huge reserves of natural minerals, and not just like random, like, oh, we've got oil underneath our ground, which is like
No.
old school, but like modern day minerals, the stuff that is
Correct.
going to make batteries and cell phones and
Correct.
computers and EVs and all these types of things.
Semiconductors
Exactly.
and making medical devices. And there's the region is thirsty for capital because it knows what it can provide to global markets. The problem is global markets continued misperception of the region. And so I've taken it on as my mission through this fund to start changing the narrative for the region. And let me be honest, I tell investors this, I'm not here to oversell the region. It is not perfect by any standard or by any definition of perfection, but no market is.
I
No
mean,
market
you
is.
illustrated that by shining the light back on our own markets, right, and
Exactly.
our own self-created instability. So,
You
like,
know,
if we're off the table as the market that is the perfect stable market, then every other market is basically just a variation of itself.
Correct. Exactly. And so for me, and what I tell my investors or prospective investors is what I'm trying to tell you is that Latin America, you have to scratch behind the surface. You have to kind of keep scratching behind the surface and figuring out how you're going to get to that gem, that diamond. And by the way, that takes time. So what I tell people is my fund is very patient capital. I don't want to sit on your capital and earn a 2% management fee either. Don't get me wrong. I need to put your capital to work, but we need to do it right. Because what we've seen over and over again in the stories we hear is that things have gone wrong. And then that's just fed that misperception. And so what I hope to do as an investor and doing it right, the right way, building relationships, patient capital, patient networking, patient deal sourcing, that's how you do that. That's how you do it right in the region. And by the way, the receptivity to that message in the region has been unbelievable because they've never heard that before.
Sure.
I walk in the door and they make assumptions. They're like, you're American, so you want easy, fast.
Right. You're gonna. The phrase I learned when I showed up in Mexico in 2015 and then planted myself in Chile in 2016, 2017, like, was helicopter. Like, you were just gonna helicopter in. You were gonna extract what you wanted or what you needed or what was good for you, and then you weren't gonna really be committed. You didn't really care. And I say this, my own story, and this is not to aggrandize myself in any way, but just kind of a practical, mechanical series of steps. Like, I became known in most circles, places I traveled, as the guy who like would do all the research. Like I would be the guy who'd have coffee with you, and then I would go home and I would Wikipedia the crap out of everything you told me about the history of your
Yeah.
country and how it became that. And then the next
Yeah.
time we had coffee, I had like 50 more really detailed questions about how the country became what it is. And that earned me, I say this humbly, like that earned me a ton of trust and respect and social and political capital because I showed that I was genuinely interested in the people and also the thing that they were most proud of, which was their country or their city or
Yeah.
their heritage.
And I have found, and this happened most recently on one of my travels, that I told folks across the table, I said, look, like, I'm here to learn. So that's basically the bottom line here. I'm here to tell you what I'm doing. I'm here to tell you how I want to do it. I'm here to tell you with whom I'd like to do it. But I'm here ultimately to learn from you. And then I plan to come back
Yeah.
and
Good for
learn
you.
some more and grow some more.
That's awesome.
I tell them, in one conversation recently, actually, I was explaining to them, my philosophy for the fund and I hope will eventually be a great investment firm focused on Latin America and whatnot. I told them, for me, it's about building relationships, finding deals and structuring the deals con Tino. And the looks that I got across the room were like, whoa, Tino. Yeah, that's exactly right. I said, Tino, what does that mean? With a lot of delicateness and sort of kid glove approach. You have to be careful, you have to be cautious, and you have to be respectful of the counterparties and of the transaction and where you're trying to deploy capital and how you want to do this investment. And so, that's when the light bulb really, I had known, but it's not until you're really pounding the pavement and on the road
Yeah.
that you're saying to yourself, okay, I see the reactions and this is the way to, we're on the right track. This is the way to do it.
100% true. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. We all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey. In a little bit here, we're going to talk about LARA Fund. We're going to give you the chance to kind of give us commercial,
Sure.
tell us all about it, size, scope, profile,
Yeah.
all that. We'll get to that in a little bit. And I've got a bunch of questions kind of that
Sure.
starting to get a little bit more micro. First one's first, right? We just talked a lot of macro and a lot of the macro philosophy. I love what I'm hearing. I know you will be successful because I know you, but I am now increasingly confident in the model behind LARA and combined with you because that's what's the real need that's going to be here. So let's do this for our listeners. Give me maybe three, let's talk micro, maybe industries or sectors, right? Give me three of the greatest opportunities that you're seeing in Latin America.
Industrial infrastructure is huge.
Okay.
Everyone is talking about it because Latin America, as I said, is at a crossroads and they're waking up to the fact that, wait, we can actually position ourselves to be part of a global supply chain and to really get our feet into the US market in a way that's not sort of in the traditional, we're going to offer you something small and expect something big in return, but we want to be big as a going in position. So industrial warehouses, logistics hubs, there's a huge interest in expanding that all across the region, up and down the Pacific coast and even in the islands. One. The second is data centers, artificial intelligence. Everyone is talking about it.
I keep forgetting that AI is going to create all this need for electricity.
AI is going to take over everything.
Right.
And everyone is talking about it. It doesn't matter the market. It's the latest rage.
Okay.
But there's some challenges there. And then I would say the third, and I'm going to say it even though it's an area where I don't invest in, I think there's a huge fintech is still sort of what everyone's talking about. Like, I think Mercado Libre has really set the tone for the region on fintech.
Right.
And, as an equity investor in real assets, I'm not focused on that, but I recognize that
Right.
that's a boon.
No,
Mexico,
100%.
Brazil, New Bank,
I was just going to say, I read something
yeah,
yesterday. I think that New Bank, New Mexico, and right? So New Bank
yeah,
Mexico is apparently
yeah,
now past a threshold where they've got like a banking license. So now they
yeah,
can expand more aggressively in Mexico.
yeah,
That's obviously huge. And I was just talking to a friend, funny, an executive at Mercado Libre like a week ago,
yeah.
catching up with him. He's an Argentine living in Mexico City, and yeah, I mean Mercado Libre's voracious appetite for all things possible is endless.
Endless. And so I think that, the region, and it's also full of young people, like you said, and they're trying to really leave a mark. And
Yeah,
they're trying to figure out how to make a space for themselves, given all of this investor interest in a lot of this. And I know that there's been a lot of speak about venture capital being saturated and sort of the move now toward, real assets, the real, asset classes that are more traditional. But I think for the region, venture is still going to be a big mover and a big
no,
shaker.
yeah, of course, 100%.
You're never going to get rid
But
of that.
no, but you need like any spectrum or continuum, right? Like you can't just have all this early capital and
No,
late capital, right? And
correct.
eventually, to your point, and to your two anchor industry examples, which are super insightful, right? Like those things in and of themselves are almost requirements for some of the other things to
Correct.
be developed, right?
100%.
So you need more
100%.
robust supply chains across North America or across the
Totally.
Americas, right?
Totally.
For a bunch of different reasons, and then you need more of that data capacity to be built to support the growth of other startups in other sectors, fintech or whatever else might come after that. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
talk to us about countries, right? So it's ironic. I had written this question before we had our little pre-conversation, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna amend it a little bit, right?
Please.
So part of my thinking was in the run up, in the build up or build out of LARA Fund that I've watched happen over the last couple of years. It's
Yeah.
your conversational tone and your areas of interest and focus is a lot around Central America, right? A lot of
Yeah.
the Central American countries, which I think is
Yeah.
awesome because it's that little sandwich region that kind of gets overlooked on both sides of the equation, typically. But now, you're also, hey, you're going back to Mexico City and you're traveling to Colombia. So the question was kind of a curiosity, and maybe you can help me reframe it. Maybe it's just a bad question. Is there more of a focus, not just of the fund, but you think in the region, or maybe there's not in these Central American countries opportunities versus say the big behemoth Brazil or Chile or Colombia, for example? Like, or have I just gotten that wrong? And now all these 30 some odd countries are in.
I think that right now the region is, I'm going to use the word frustrated again, but in a different way. I think what we've seen, I talk about the universal we because you're a Latin Americanist as well, is that Brazil and Mexico have outperformed, outshined, and outdominated every other market in the region. And there's a reason for that. You've got sophisticated investors who are frontier thinkers. You've got capital that moves really quickly. Mexico and Brazil are open. They're open for business. I cannot deny it. It's
Yeah.
a fact.
I mean, I used to joke, and my Portuguese Brazilian friends used to hate this when I would say, when you give me the statistics about Latin America in this context, it used to be like venture capital. I was like, just take Brazil out, please. I was like, because that would be like calling the U.S. like North America. Like
No,
it's like
it's
Canada,
distortive.
like it's right. It's so kind of not disruptive isn't the word I'm looking for. It's just misleading, right? In the context of because it's its own.
It's disproportionate
Massive.
because it's
Thank
its
you.
own massive.
Thank you. That's
Yes,
the word.
it's disproportionate.
Yes.
It's not apples to oranges.
So you see lots of opportunities in secondary South American countries and these Central American markets that have historically gotten overlooked.
So then exactly. So as a result, you've got a lot of jealousy because you've got a lot of other emerging markets that are clamoring for capital with a lot of opportunities that are standing still because they don't have the attention. So for us early on, we thought, targeting these middle markets, targeting these smaller markets help us as a fund also because limited competition, you don't have oversaturation, and you can start building much stronger ties locally with local partners, operators, and co-financiers and co-investors, right? Financial institutions, banks who could come in with debt, or co-investors who are willing to come in as equity sponsors as well. I think what we've seen and what's evolved in the last year is that Actually, a lot of the bigger countries suffer from the same problem too. It's just that they don't talk about it because it's just not convenient for them to talk about it, like
Right.
a Colombia, like a Chile, like a Peru. So we've realized that we need to be a little more open in terms of, we were always going to invest in these other markets, but I think we're being much more open and much more specifically targeting of these other markets and strategic sectors because we realize actually maybe, they can't. I think a lot of these markets are on the outs right now,
Yeah.
and where we could be a value add is where we want to be.
That's great. And a lot of it, there's a bunch of macro factors, I would imagine, and economists who are smarter than you and I would probably school us on this front. But a
Yep.
lot of it is down to what you talked about in the opening, which is just the recovery post pandemic
Yeah.
has lagged in the region as
It's
a
been
whole.
anemic. It's been anemic. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line. And
Yeah.
so, and I think governments are evolving and much more mature than they were even 15 years ago and able to say, hey, we can't do this. So now who's going to do it? And you
Yeah.
see a private sector that now is increasingly trying to figure this out. Who can we bring in? Who can we partner with? How can we sort of curry favor with this sovereign wealth fund or this big investor or with a BlackRock?
Yep.
Um, that's sort of where we're seeing the dynamic moving. And I think now that also creates an opening for smaller niche funds like ours because their efforts to get a BlackRock or an Apollo's attention are not really are not, manifesting themselves in the way that they want.
Sure. Yeah.
And therefore that's an opportunity for us as a niche fund with a real interest in really focusing and having a vision for the region to be that partner of choice for them.
Yeah, that's terrific. Okay, so
So
let's talk about the fund. Let's talk about LARA
sure.
Fund. Like this is your chance to kind of give us your commercial, so to speak, right? So give us the vision for the fund, kind of the long term.
Yeah.
Give us the snapshot of just this is what
Yeah.
we are, this is how big we are, and again, anything that you can't speak about publicly, obviously, please don't. I don't
Okay.
want. I'm not that guy, but everything that you can share to give our listeners context on it,
Of
please do.
course.
So I would love
Of
for us to
course. Thank
understand
you
it
for
better.
that. So LARA Fund is the first and only, we are a woman-led fund. We are the first and only US-based private equity fund focused 100,000% on Latin America. That's where we are bread and butter. We want to focus on private equity in strategic sectors, and those are three. It's energy transition, digital infrastructure, data centers, everything related to AI, and industrial infrastructure. So from logistics to airports to ports to warehouses to take advantage of the nearshoring movement that I said earlier will be happening as these supply chains snap into place. We are focused on middle markets. As I said earlier, we thought, why not play where no one else wants to play? So we have top tier markets, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, Ecuador, Paraguay, who no one talks about.
Literally,
And
no one even goes to
no one,
Paraguay. Yeah.
no one. And we want to also operate in the Colombia, to Chile, Peru, where we can be there side by side with great strategic sponsors and operators in strategic assets. We are trying to raise $1 billion fund.
Okay. That now we just made our clear statement of ambition.
Yes. And we are at almost 100 million so far.
And this has been going on now for, I mean, the formation of it's for a while, but like the active fundraising is really only a little over a
Active
year.
fundraising maybe for the last year. Yeah.
Right.
About the last 12 months. Not even. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So we're really excited about it. Very small team. And we don't mind being small. My vision really for LARA going forward, Fund One, like I said, $1 billion fund, and I have full faith that I will obtain that. I think we are very unique. We bring a true value add, not only because of my experience and knowledge in the region, but frankly, because of our philosophy toward the region, which I shared earlier. And going forward, I want this to be an investment firm, a Hispanic woman led investment firm focused on Latin America, because I believe that I can make a difference. I've tried in every other route and pathway career wise, and I think I have made a difference. But I think that, you have to put your money where your mouth is and you have to sit across the table and you have to really be hard nosed and direct and make things happen for the region to take it seriously. And I think that the fund can have that impact on a much grander scale, deploying capital and being smart about it.
Two follow-ons. One is, and this is just, I'm not a private equity investor, so I ask a bit naively probably, but is deploying some of this earliest capital that's being raised into some early projects and kind of putting a stake in the ground as a
Mhm.
marker of potential success. Is that a big piece of then convincing follow-on additional capital to come along for the ride?
100%. So our first challenge is obviously we, as a first-time fund, the first challenge is prove that we can raise capital. Prove that we have the grit to get through fundraising and get to a certain marker. For me, between 100 and 200 has become sort of my internal ambition to be seen as a real private equity investor in the region. And I'm really, really proud that we're close to 100 because it's not easy. Fundraising hasn't been easy for anybody
No,
these last couple of
especially
years.
this last year, like in the context
Yes,
of change on the global
impossible.
scale, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that for us, as soon as we get that momentum, it's about deployment of capital. And that's where agree 100%. We have to put that stake in the ground. And I'm really excited at the opportunities that we're looking at. We're looking at some really dynamic markets. We have some early inroads in some of the smaller markets, like I mentioned, in El Salvador, Dominican Republic, Ecuador. And I think that Mexico has a lot to bear here as well. And I'm traveling there a lot to get a really good lay of the land. Mexico's complex, but I'm getting a lot more comfortable there and getting my feet wet. So I do foresee deployment of capital by the first quarter of 2026. Like I said, patient capital, make sure we get all the hair off the transaction and get money out the door 100%. That's my plan.
We second question. We talked offline before the show just about the importance of relationships, right? And when we know this, everybody listening to this, everybody who's a follower of me knows that that's critical in everything we're trying to
Yeah.
do. Let me ask you more specifically, right? So you are building relationships. You need to build kind of an evergreen pipeline of new relationships and people that can be of direct import on deals, deal flow, but also people that can be of influence and help open doors and create credibility, et cetera. So if there were people listening throughout the region, which there are, right, that they think like, oh, how could I or would I be a good partner to help her to achieve these ambitions, right? Like maybe there's something in my profile or our firm's profile in the region, or maybe I'm in government, maybe I'm in the private sector, maybe I'm in an NGO, maybe I've got the like what are the types of people or organizations that you want to partner with going forward?
So I love your question because it's multifaceted, because the region is multifaceted. So I'm looking for three things. I'm looking for partners on the ground as operators. So if you're a great operator in the digital data center space, if you're a great operator of energy transition assets, solar assets, whatever it might be, an LNG asset, if you're a great, if you're thinking about operating an industrial park in Mexico, call me. I'm looking
Okay.
for great operators, trustworthy operators that I can go to my investors and say, hey, this is a great deal, experienced operators with a track record who have access to clients to come in the door. Then we're starting to cook. So that's the first category, great operators. I'm also looking for great financial partners. What do I mean by that? Great institutions that have capital that would love to co-invest with me on assets, who are looking to diversify their portfolios of assets or their portfolio in general. I'm looking for financial institutions that can bring me deals because they can go through their internal due diligence processes, and then I can come in and do my due diligence process, and then we can get to an even better deal. I'm convinced going through those processes together and with different expertise and a different eye toward looking at those transactions to make them the most productive and the most, juice them for the most return. So that's the second category of partner that I'm looking for. And third, yes, I'm looking for partners in governments. I'm looking for folks in governments who are aware of the complexities of their markets and sectors, but who have the pulse of where their own local private sector is, how much local capital can do, how much it can't do, and who can help sort of hold my hand, bringing me to the table to have these more strategic discussions. And I lied. There's four. I'm looking for local families,
Okay.
local capital,
Okay.
because the local families in the region, and you know this way better than I do, they hold a lot of assets. A lot of the family offices, a lot of families who have corporations who are at the helm of the bigger companies in the region, they have their own assets. They do their own asset management. quite well, and they've been
Yeah.
doing it for 20 years.
Yep.
I want to talk to them. I want to get to know who they are, not because I want to take over their portfolios, not because of anything, but because I can be a partner for them as a US based investor with that perception and paradigm through which I'm looking at the region. And I can bring that value add. I can be that bridge because I also have other external just strategic partners that I've already developed relationships with who can bring something to the table for project. Name the
That's
project, and I can bring that to the table. So
you nailed
local
it.
capital, local families, give me a call.
Yeah. No, that's huge. Yeah, it is those four categories. And also, this is what makes you a great podcast guest because you just set me up for the next question. Um,
Awesome.
I love that. Thank you for that. We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at eSudo. You know, running any business, but especially a law firm, means balancing a lot. And technology, frankly, shouldn't be a headache. eSudo makes information technology and cybersecurity simple for law firms large or small. With over 20 years of experience, they specialize in everything from Microsoft 365 management to advanced cybersecurity solutions. They help you to stay ahead of threats, manage your data securely, and keep your tech running smoothly so that you can focus on what matters most, your clients. eSudo understands the legal industry's unique needs, offering tailored solutions to ensure that your firm is always in compliance and always protected. Are you ready to upgrade your firm's technology or get help with your questions? Visit esudo.com. Right. So, because my perception of the region when I was in it day to day was that, there's always Chile is the most renowned example, right? Seven
Yeah.
families, right?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it's like you Wikipedia
Yeah.
the seven families, and it tells you like
Yeah.
part of the whole history of Chile. And it also helps you understand like how to wire the Chilean economy, and basically I used to call it like in about 60 people. Right. And if you could just map together the right 60 people, you could wire the entire Chilean economy.
Yes.
Which is
100%.
what your job now is, right? But I'm curious though, because that seems to be kind of that's the old school story of Latin America, right? That's the last 100 years. Are we entering an era where this next 25 to 50 years is going to be the influx of new outside investment capital and new partners like you, where they will work together with these 7, 10, 5 to 25 families? Or
That's
will
my
they
vision.
and you alluded to it in your answer on that last point, might some of these families that have basically run roughshod imperialistically, so to speak, over their countries, right? Like, might they see outside capital as a threat? And then is that subculture of like, ooh, we don't trust anybody who isn't us?
Yeah.
Like, does that slow outside capital from coming?
So I'll start with your second comment first. I think to your point, and actually I had a very honest conversation recently on one of my travels. There's a lot of people, and I've lived this through my career, where there's a lot of countries and governments and private sectors who've come see me or others, and I participated in meetings with them in Washington, D.C., with the trappings of Washington, D.C., and they say, hey, we need more private capital. We need money to come in, to develop our country, to drive our economy, et cetera, et cetera. Great. Then why is there a high barrier to entry?
Right.
Why is every door closed? Or why is there a lot of skepticism? And that gets down to sort of what you were saying, where I think that the barrier to entry in a lot of these markets, quite frankly, I think a lot of investors have thought that there's a dollar value to that entry price. And I've realized that there is a cultural value to that entry price. And the price is not, come in and buy up a concession to a road. The price is come get to know who I am, get to know my family, get to know my business, get to know how I got to be who I am and what I want to do for my country.
Yeah.
And then we can start talking business. So there's a cultural, relational price that investors should pay.
Yep.
To pay,
No,
to play in these environments.
That's a very nuanced and not surprised coming from you. That's a very nuanced, thoughtful analysis of the reality on the ground, right? I mean, I could put an exclamation point on that with just a funny personal anecdote, right? I was
Yeah.
my 31-year-old daughter is half Mexican, half me, right? And so she's that her mom, God bless her, being born and raised in Mexico City. Yet when we got married in 1992 in Arizona, like she literally was still cashing a paycheck and putting some of that money under the mattress.
Yeah.
Like, and that
exactly.
was after like 4 years of university education in the U.S. and like
Yeah.
breaking away from some of her
Exactly.
cultural barriers. But like there is
Totally.
just in some parts of Latin American culture, in some countries, it's more exercised than others. There is just
Correct.
a deep-seated distrust of everything from the outside.
Outside.
or of institutions.
Correct.
Right? And LARA Fund is could be perceived by people much
100%.
more powerful than my ex-wife, could be perceived as both an institution and an outsider, right?
Correct.
And
100%.
therefore a threat to my dynasty that I built in central Mexico, because I have bought all the concessions to all the things over the last 100 years, and
Right.
I want my dynasty to continue, right? Or my dynasty in El Salvador or Ecuador, wherever it might be.
Yeah.
And so that's a fine dance that you have to dance.
And I think it's a perception of the outside that's well earned because of the way that these
Yes.
countries and families have been trampled by foreign investors who have a very elementary understanding of the region today. And I don't blame them.
Right.
I have zero blame to impose or in place on them. They are absolutely right to be protectionist.
I love that.
100%. Now, to your first point, where do I see it evolving? I think that the markets and the idea of businesses remaining homegrown and scaling within their confines of their geographic, parameters, I think those days are ending, because for a region that wants a foothold in the American market, for a region that sees Europe as a destination for export, Asia as well, let's X out China for now. I think that there's an inevitability that they will need to open up. Now, I want to be first in line because I want to build the groundwork, doing this right and understanding kind of the mindsets. Part of being a good investor is understanding the mindset of the environment you're going in and the people you want to work with. So I hope to be first in line of who they call when they're ready. So in the next 5 to 10 years, let's say the generational change that you were alluding to, I think in a generation, you're going to have those same dynastic families. There's 5 in Colombia, right? And you can say that in every country. You're going to still have those same 5 or to 7 to 6 to 10 dynastic families, but they're going to be multinational level and multinational in their approach because they're going to have the investors they want.
Yeah. No, that's really well said.
And I hope to be part of that stable.
Globalism is a fait accompli. It is what it is. It is the system now.
Yeah.
We can nuance, argue this, that point, this particular political point of view at this moment in time in this country, but it's
100%.
all a game that's over.
Totally.
We are integrated.
100%.
And history would show us over the last 50 to 75 years, in the macro kind of broadest sense, for the good of most everybody involved.
Yes.
Like literally, we are all collectively better off today than we were, no matter how difficult today is. We're better off than we were
perfectly 50, better
75,
off
100 years ago. So you're leaning
it's
into
inevitable.
That. Yeah, and all those younger the next generations of people in these families are all broadly educated, right? All broadly globally experienced and traveled, and they're looking at how their dads and their grandfathers, because yes, sadly, it was always dads and grandfathers only.
Yes,
like how the men in this family built those dynasties, and they're saying like, okay, how do we take them into another direction in new ways?
Yeah, and to take everyone and everything to another level requires an openness, but again, that distrust is well placed.
Yep.
The high barrier to entry makes sense.
And as you say, the cultural onus is, and the price to pay is on you, the fund
Correct.
managers and the fund operators, right? It's on you as you come in, and that ultimately is what I believe. Humbly, I've said this to you off the air. I would say it on air. Like that is what I believe is one of your individually and LARA Fund's massive differentiated opportunities, is because you are you literally are walking the walk that you are talking, and that is your vision and mission, which is it's going to serve you and your investors, your LPs very well over time. I'm
I hope so.
curious. I'm curious. Um,
Please.
you had such a varied background, right? Are there parts of is there just parts of what you do on a daily basis now where you feel like you have to unlearn everything that you mastered in government and politics?
Yes.
Yeah. What would
Number one
be
is
a couple that jump out on a daily basis for you?
I have to be patient and I can't just make things happen anymore.
Okay.
Like when you're draped in the red, white, and blue and you're draped with the seal of the White House on every email or business card or a 202 phone call, things get done. Unquestionably, things get done. And I've learned as a fund manager, you cannot make things happen. You have to really woo and win people over. You have to be a true believer in what you're trying to do. You have to be a true believer in the region you want to be investing in as an investor. You have to really convey that confidence, not only in your ability to make things happen, in my ability to raise $1 billion fund and to do it well for Latin America, but that confidence that you bring to the table, a specific skill set that no one else does. I think that for my career in government, I've taken it for granted because I've always been blessed to have very important seals and three letters to back me up and back up my expertise that I've kind of assumed going in the door that I've won everyone over. So it's been a really challenging part of my journey in becoming an entrepreneur, shedding that assumption that I'm just going to get it all done because
Yeah.
of who I am.
That's got to be a big one. Big shift.
It's been really jarring. It's been really frustrating and very jarring.
Yeah.
But I think that's why I love it because it's made me grow as a professional.
No. Yeah.
Because you can't,
Unquestionably.
because I've been spoiled, like 100% spoiled. And I tell people that all the time. I was so spoiled to work for my government because I was able to make things happen and I was able to see impact right away. So I was able to feed that need to see impact with a lot of effort. It wasn't that it was easy,
Oh no.
but certainly, you know, the the course was charted for me, so it was just me kind of
In,
jumping and hopping along the way.
in fairness to you, though, and we're not talking a lot about it in this particular episode. If people have listened to the show for a long time, they've heard a prior episode with you and a lot of your personal story. Like,
Yeah,
let's be clear, right? You busted your ass in building the life that you have built, being the daughter of the parents that you grew up in,
yeah,
with the way you grew up in the country, and then you've charted this path. Like you
yeah,
earned everything that
yeah.
you earned
Thank
all
you.
those letters, you earned all those titles, you earned
Yes,
the
yes,
experiences that you showed with those titles and how you deployed your work product inside of government earned you the right to get invited into those rooms. It earns you the mentorship of the people that mentored you. But you did
yeah.
get to a point where it was like, okay, now I'm not that person anymore. I'm up here, like woohoo. And now you've crazily, instinctively decided to like chuck yourself back out into the private world and be like, start all over again.
Start all over again. And so it's been, and to your point, yes. And I think for my journey wasn't easy, and I've always fought hard for everything I've gotten. And I think that I love that I love that that's been my journey. That nothing's been easy and I've had to fight for it and prove myself over and over and over again. Because ultimately that's what I need to do as a fund manager, right? So my core hasn't changed. The core of needing to prove, to make sure it's done right, to make sure it's airtight, because that's how I get invited in the room. That's how I excelled before. I'm employing those same skills. I think it's just that once you're in that journey, I was in that journey for 20 years and I got to that point, like you said, of like, okay, I'm going to stroll into this room that I know I fought hard to get into, but now I'm going to own it. You know, it's been a challenge to kind of take a step back and say, okay, I don't own any of this space. I own none of it. And
Humbling,
everyone
I would
else,
imagine. Humbling, I would
yes,
imagine. Yeah.
everyone has a leg up on me. I've got to learn as I go. And I do believe that my career in government has helped me build the confidence to walk in the room, knowing what I know and admit what I don't know. And it's helped me also be discerning of who I want to be in the room with. So even with investors, it's helping me discern as a fund manager, you have to know, who do I want to let into my family and who don't I?
Yep, absolutely.
100%. That's also a big part of the game here. Like, you need to have the right investors who believe in you, your product, your philosophy, and they have to want to see you grow, not test you, not challenge you for the sake of proving that you don't know your stuff just yet. I hate people like that.
Yeah, no.
They're the
You
worst.
got as we would say in Mexico, you got to be able to sniff out the smoke sellers, right?
A
And
hundred percent. And
keep those smoke sellers out of the circle, because they're just going to eat up. They're going to suck up all the energy in the
they're going to
room. And
suck up all the energy.
yeah,
And I don't want that either. And so I
yeah,
think that it's been jarring, it's been humbling, and I've welcomed it. I needed it. I really, really did. And I know it's weird to say that, but
it's not to the government worker part of you. It's definitely weird to say that. To the entrepreneurial side of the audience listening, it's like, welcome to the other side, sister. Like
yeah,
you're now one of
yeah.
us.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it because here's the reality. You can only sit at the top of one little mountain for so long, but then it was almost like I was sitting on the peak of, I don't even know the mountain peak names, but like the
yep,
peak of this mountain. And then
yep,
I looked at Kilimanjaro and I was like, holy moly,
right.
that's the mountain I want to get on next. So how do I climb that one?
Good
And
for you.
so that's how I see this journey.
Here's an interesting parallel. Two questions to finish up. One, well, the second one will be our kind of finishing question, which we'll get to in a second here. But my last question in this main part of the conversation is just, it's such a great parallel, right? Like you did against the odds. I'll say it, my words, not yours, right? You carved out an incredible professional life. You got to the top of the peaks of some of these mountains in your career inside of government public policy in the U.S. and in the region. And you did that as a woman fighting against all the systems that are institutionalized against you. And now here's the parallel that I'm curious about. I want to hear what you've been experiencing and kind of how you're going to process this successfully. Because now you're like, I'm out at the front of the tip of the spear of this new organization, and I'm humbly coming. I'm starting anew. I'm taking all my experiences, but I'm coming to this market new, and I want to learn. You've said that already. I'm here to learn, and I'm here to help you
Yeah.
ultimately, right? But man, if you aren't now a Latina swimming in a world dominated by machismo, male culture on steroids, like if we think that Washington, D.C. is male dominated people, you've never traveled and worked in Latin America. It makes Washington, D.C. look like the most equitable, equal place in the history of the mankind, right? So,
Yes.
so how are you now, as a fierce, talented, smart, ready, experienced Latina, coming to the region dominated by men, culturally like dismissive of you, probably calling and saying like, okay, that's great, we met you. Now where's the male partner? Like where are your male partner? Where are the old guys with the gray hair that we can come in and we can bullshit with and have cigars with? And like, how are you processing that? Are you experiencing that so far? And then how are you processing?
So funny enough, I'll tell you two things. I used to think that was a Latino culture thing, but we have that problem in the United States
Yeah,
of
no,
beautiful
it's
America.
a male culture thing.
It is a thing. And if anybody who knows me knows anything, they know that I have very little tolerance for that. And I have found that, and this goes to my point about, as a fund manager, you have to be discerning about who you're willing to let into your fund, and it's been a hard learned lesson over the last year, but a good one, because I have realized that for the smart investors, it's not a thing.
Okay.
For the tested, proven, successful people in the region, men, not even an issue.
Okay. That's great to hear.
And you know what it's becoming for me? It's a litmus test of insecurity. And it's a litmus test of, it's a you problem. Like my son says, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
I love that.
And I have zero problems walking away from that
Good for
because I
you.
don't need them. I don't need them. I don't need the business. I don't need their capital. And I have no problems telling people that. I just don't need
No,
it.
I love
And
that.
I
I
think
that's that
I just don't.
I was not the answer I expected because of the specificity of it. Not I expected the fight and the recognition of it, right? Because I know
Yeah.
you. But
Yeah.
the specificity of that idea that we've taken that which has been the problem and we're now using that to your advantage as your litmus test. Like if you fail this litmus test, which is pretty easy for a lot of people in that region
Yeah.
to fail, right?
Yeah.
Like you're immediately disqualifying yourself from me.
Correct.
Good
Like
for you.
if you don't see it, then you're not going to be a part of this. And you're going to call me when I'm $1 billion fund, and you're going to desperately want to be a part of my fund too. And guess what? Nope.
Yeah.
Because the smart investors who respect me, where I come from, who aren't focused on the need to see who the senior male managing partner is, because there is none, by the way, in my firm,
Yep.
don't call me.
That's great.
I don't need it. So
Maybe
it's for me a litmus test.
I love it. That might be the best answer to that generic question that I've ever heard from any woman investor
Yeah.
in 5 years of doing this show. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. That's going to be hugely
Yeah.
empowering to a bunch of people listening. All right, last question.
Of course.
And then we'll make sure we tell people how they can connect with you, find the fund, find
Awesome.
you guys online,
Yes.
all that stuff. But last question: if I'm someone who's listening who wants to break into investing in Latin America, and this could be anybody, but hey, maybe it's if I'm a young woman in the U.S. or in Europe or somewhere or in Latin America who wants to break into investing, what are the first two things that you can think of that person should do?
Do your homework and know what markets. One, because I have learned that investors in Latin America who are busy, they don't have time. They're not going to coddle, to your prior question. And they think they're doing you a favor. So make sure you go in and convince them that you're doing them the favor by showing up. So do your homework, know the markets, know your sectors, know what you're trying to deliver and what impact you're trying to have.
Love
And
it.
I would say the second thing, have a lot of guts. Develop a really big barrel and bucket, or however you want to classify it, a lot of guts, because it's not easy and it's not friendly. You have to really prove who you are, and you have to have a lot of guts to do it. And it's going to require a lot of just sitting through things and conversations and meetings that, you're going to be dressed down, and being able to stand up and say, hey, I'm really glad you've taught me a lot, but I'm about to teach you something too. And if this isn't a conversation that's productive, glad I had it, drop it. So you need to have a lot of guts to get through that process.
That's terrific. Amazing, simple, concise advice. And I'll add the third point to that is if you want to become an investor in Latin American break-in, and you do the first two things that you suggested, the third thing is follow her. Find Jessica Bedoya, follow her,
You're
attach to
amazing.
her.
Thank you.
Find ways that you can meet her, to become mentored by her, to find ways that you can provide value to the fund in the markets. Right, she's already articulated the types of people that she wants and needs as relationships and partners in the endeavors that they're trying to build. So find your way to them. So on that note, it's been awesome. Like
You're awesome. Thank you.
It's been great to connect. We've been connected now for a long time, and we stay connected, and then we follow each other on social. And so we always loosely know what's going on in our lives. But I just have felt compelled in the last couple of months as I reached out to you that I said, like, it's the time to tell the LARA story in more wide ranging way. And it was just, I feel like we're in a time of, people can easily dismiss the things that they have thought about as being on the margins. A whole region like that. Well, right now it's too uncertain, so we're just going to hunker down and focus on the thing we know. And the truth is, right now, because of the uncertainty, that's a huge opportunity on the margins to focus on the things that you don't know. Because if you just show up as you're doing, as you said, and you say, I'm here to learn and I'm here to help, and ultimately the investments that we're going to make are going to help you develop your country and the economy, everybody wins. Like that's your moment, right? So I just felt compelled. I just felt like I needed you to be on the show. And I also, by the way, I may have said this to you in the prep, like, I think we might need to have you visit the show a couple times a year, like going forward.
I love it.
We may need to make this a recurring update from the road of what's going on.
I welcome it. I love it. I would love that, because at the end of the day, here's what I say, like, even to my circles in DC, talking about, policy making, you never abandon that, even though you're not in it anymore. Who can argue against prosperity, right? Like, you can argue about trade. You can argue about tariffs. You can argue about China.
There's lots of argue about the how and the how it, but the idea of the end goal.
What reasonable minded person in Latin America, in 30 of the 33 countries,
Yep.
would argue against prosperity? And who, as an American investor or in the private capital space, whether you do debt or equity or whatever you do in America, who would argue against prosperity? So
Not true.
this is a win-win. And for
100%
me,
true.
the fund is finally the platform that I've had to create the architecture to convey that prosperity is for everybody and the pie is big enough.
Love it. That's 100% true. That's a mic drop moment for you right there. All right. So how do we find the fund and or you on social websites, all that kind of stuff?
Okay, so fund is www.larafund.com. Everyone take a look. It's a very simple website, but I've been doing a lot more blog writing, and I'll have a blog post coming up early next week talking a little bit about prosperity. So check it out. On LinkedIn, you can just find me, Jessica L. Bedoya. You can find LARA Fund on LinkedIn as well, and my Twitter handle is Jessica L. Bedoya.
Love it. That's great. It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the time. I really enjoy speaking with you. Thank you for the invitation. I feel
My
honored.
pleasure. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.